Welcome to a brand new episode of the Soul Blazers podcast. Co-hosts Amanda Ware, our Christmas queen and founder of Hello Holidays, and Dr. Kara Osborne, our multi-venture guru, are ready to sit down and share their stories, insights, and wisdom to inspire aspiring trailblazers like you who are gearing up to start your own business, seeking personal growth, or looking for that spark to set your soul ablaze.
So I got interested in this whole energy of money thing. Actually, as we were starting to talk about working together and trying to think about certainly my own relationship with money, but also how to help other people who feel even stickier about it than I do. And I'm not avoidant of the math or the money from a quantitative aspect. Doesn't bother me at all. But if I'm being totally honest, there are parts of the am I going to have enough sort of scarcity anxiety, especially as I'm going through these big shifts and transitions and taking on more and more work without exactly knowing how that's going to pay off. And it's not as, that's a big part of entrepreneurship, is you have to put all this work in and you don't really see the immediate gratification, right? Like if you're waiting tables and you get paid out of the tip pool at the end of your shift, that's right now, right? And there are people who need that, and that's their comfort level, and they can't even wait for a weekly pay stub or once a month or whatever. Certainly I've always had a regular salaried job, but as I've started different businesses, that sort of ebb and flow and lack of predictability, even the bed and breakfast, of not being able to say exactly how many guests we're going to have from month to month. So the energy of money and being able to talk about money is obviously a critical part of being an entrepreneur. And even though I've started things and, the things that I've done more recently, and we'll talk more about those things in individual episodes, so look out for that. But it's a different level of unpredictability, and it's also just mine and Steve's. It's just us. There is no team, there is no investor. It's our money. There's no other, essentially there's nobody to blame, right? You get all the control, but you also have all the responsibility. And I love the things that we've done, and I'm thrilled with them. So just as a minute to catch up, we were starting this discussion of money, and we're recording this sitting on a sofa, and all of a sudden Amanda got so uncomfortable. She literally stood up and wiggled and started looking for a pillow to put in her lap, because that's actually how you feel about money. It's physically bothersome for you, and you as an aggressive, high energy person, it's the energy in your body is opposed to discussing money. And here's what I think happens for a lot of women. We have been told at some point in life, often by a man, that we're not good at money, or that we're frivolous, or we buy things, and that essentially we are a risk to the financial safety and security of our households, and that it's better if we just let somebody else do it. And I think it's actually super, super important. My cousin Shelby, who manages the Butcher Rose, the bed and breakfast that we run, one of the things I told her when she was my nanny, when the kids were really little, the boys were 3 and 5, because I was going through struggles with their dad about money. And it's one of those things that couples should really be able to talk about, and talk about with ease, because it's essentially the, in the real world support system for how you want to live your life. And you need to be able to make decisions together. And how are you going to do that if you can't talk about it? And anytime one person is doing all of something and one person is doing none of it, there's an imbalance, and that doesn't give you room to both have input, right? And for people who have past trauma or fears around money, controlling every cent is really important. For people who don't maybe have that, it's easy to say, sure, that's important to you, you take it over. But I said to Shelby really early on, if you get married, whatever your situation is, always make at least a little bit of money, and always have a bank account that your partner doesn't have access to. Because I'd watched, as a midwife and just in general, I'd watched women around me make decisions that were not in their own best interest because they didn't feel like they had the financial resources to support themselves, or that they didn't have a way to make enough money to support themselves. They had to be in this dependent position where they were depending on their husband or their parents or whomever other than themselves. And as, students who are thinking about being entrepreneurs, you have to get comfortable supporting yourself before you can support a business and employees and other people, right? And when you're jumping into a business and you just kind of think, well, I'm really passionate about the product, or I'm really passionate about the service, but I don't want to deal with the money part. Well, okay, but if you're not dealing with the money part, then you're still choosing not to decide is still a decision. Choosing not,
Totally.
Choosing not to engage is still playing into a power dynamic. So as we started talking about all this, I randomly ran across this book called Rich as Fuck, and the author is this woman, Amanda Frances. She has a background that's more similar to yours than to mine. She's from Oklahoma. She came out of a very conservative church. She lives out in like Beverly Hills, somewhere on the West Coast, like LA, basically. And, it's about the energy of money and sort of the relationship with money. And I have this sort of protective default mechanism of being overly intellectual about things and very data driven and quantitative. So when I first started the book, I just couldn't resonate at all, because it all seemed like blonde churchy girl stuff that I didn't get, and B, coming from like an energetic spiritual woo woo place that is not how I have typically related to money. And then as I started reading it more and going through the exercises, it really sort of settled in that there are emotional aspects and there are responses in your body, in your interaction with resources. Money is a very obvious version of a resource, but whatever your resources are, whether that's just your energy during the day or your friendships or your relationships or whatever. So anyway, if anybody's interested, Amanda Frances is a good person to reach out to help realign how you interact with, and just to get to the bottom of why do you get so wiggly when it's time to talk about money? What is it that's there that makes you physically uncomfortable? What is it about it that seems hard? Because
I feel like we're getting into the dirty stuff real early. It feels very vulnerable. I'm feeling super vulnerable right now. That's why I'm getting antsy. I could feel it. My shoulders started to hurt. I was like, oh, this is because this is my favorite room of the house, whatever. When I read Amanda Frances' book, I was shocked that it was one of your favorite books, because she does come at it from this she's sharp as a tack, smart as a whip, but she kind of has that valley girl, and she is adorable and easy to stereotype. But man, I cried. I remember I told you I was out on a walk. I was on a hike with Boo, and I have a video of it, of my response to the first exercise. It was, I can handle money. I am perfectly capable of handling money. And saying that out loud and not being afraid of money. We all are walking question marks, right? We question ourselves, especially people in the head triad. If you are what's the head triad? 5, 6, 7? Mm-hmm. We question and all that. So with money, I've questioned myself, and then I actually don't question myself. I just go to Chad. Mm-hmm. Or growing up, my dad is he knows where every penny is. He's very, very limited on, he doesn't limit. He's, generous. But growing up, we knew, You order
Exactly.
water. And I'm just not that way. I'm more like, well, more will come. It'll be fine. Like YOLO. It's a good time. So now that I have a business, and that part is a stressful part of it. And it is something I'm having to learn, and it does hold me back, and it does make me feel limited, and it does take away my freedom in some aspects. I don't get to do everything I want to do because of money.
Yeah.
So if I'm coming at it, my perception of money through there are probably every other 7 on the Enneagram is probably much better at money than I am, but that's where I come from, is I see money as now I look at it as it'll always come back, because if I didn't look at it that way, it's going to limit me, and that sounds sad, awful.
Well, I think though you've done a funny, not funny, haha, but you've figured out your own like workaround for that. So instead of calling it a budget, you call it a spending plan.
I do.
Right?
No one's allowed to use a budget around me.
That's such a 7 thing. It's
Or-
like, I do not want to believe that I have limits. We're going to call that a spending plan. We're going to see it from a positive, not a negative, restrictive.
It's true. Can
We're
we
gonna
just
see it from a
say
positive.
that on this podcast and in all business we do? We're just doing spending plans.
Only spending
Or
plans.
we're budgeting, ing, spending, ing.
Right.
We're doing it. It's one thing.
Right. But I think for new entrepreneurs and people who are really thinking about starting something, like, there's no such thing as enough money when you're starting something. There's never enough money because you're just starting it. And getting revenue in the door can smooth out a lot of spending plan issues. But if you can, there's no way to like manage the cost down to being in the place you want to be. What you have to do is focus on the money coming in. And when you get really focused on every single thing that you have to pay for and the money going out, you can totally lose sight of what you need to do to bring money in, bring revenue in. And so, things like even inventory and liquidating inventory, it's like, seeing that as like a way to generate revenue, a way to bring money in, regardless of what the margin on that is. Like, it's important to just say, like, well, it's not doing me any good sitting on this shelf, right? Sitting on the shelf, you might as well have stacks of $100 bills sitting in the garage. Except for $100 bills, you could at least trade for something else that you want. One too many, green metallic balls that are just sitting there. It's harder to trade your green ball for, a cheeseburger. Like, turning it back into dollars is like...
You make it sound so easy.
Well, I make it sound easy because that's how I feel about it. And, I think my advice to somebody who's starting something for the first time, and this was not what I did, and I lived through it the hard way, is like, get your head wrapped around your own personal relationship with money and your feelings about it before you jump into a situation where necessarily it's going to be waxing and waning and low times and high times. And like, if you haven't yet wrestled through your own emotional baggage around money, and then all of a sudden you're like trying to make payroll, and cash flow is the reason most businesses don't make it. So you'll never be able to have so much savings in the bank that you won't have to worry about it. You will always worry about it. There will always be periods of growth. There will always be inflection points in a business. There will always be a place where you have to like make the bet. You have to like take out debt for the inventory that you want to buy, or have a line of credit, and not always know, am I for sure going to be able to pay it off? Like, those are the realities of what it means to be in business for yourself. And I think that's something that, if I could say, do what I say and not what I did, I wish that I'd spent more time thinking about and working on that before, starting the birth centers years ago.
Yeah, I wish when I started everything, I wish 20 years ago I would have said spending plan instead of budget. I know that sounds crazy, but I think the word budget, and then the community I was in, everyone was obsessed with Dave Ramsey. They were obsessed. I mean, Chad and I taught a course on Dave Ramsey. Obviously, he taught it, and I was like sitting beside him. And we were doing the Dave Ramsey. I did the envelopes. It was awful. It was one of the lowest points in my life. Like, I hated that part. Like, feeling like I did not. I think I would have changed the word budget to spending plan. And I think that would have just shifted my mindset to being more open and free about it. And now I'm learning about money, and it is fascinating. It's still, I'm a work in progress. And I am willing to be open about that with you. It feels very safe. So I'm excited about what I'm going to look like in a year when we talk about money. Maybe I'll be teaching on money.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think in medicine we have this like see one, do one, teach one process, right? For procedures, and like you have to have like seen somebody do it. You have to try it yourself, and then you need to go through that step of explaining it to somebody who's just behind you on the path, because that's how you can really like let it settle in for yourself. For those of us who are teachers by nature, it's important to like get to a place where you feel like you have something to teach. Not because you're the world's expert, but because you've learned enough for yourself, and you know what worked for you and what didn't work for you, and you've tried it and implemented it, and now you can share with somebody else how that went.
Yeah, that's good. We're going to talk a lot more about how we use money and how you and I use money with Hello Holidays and in our businesses. And I'm excited about having a place to open that up to and talk about what we did do. Speaking of money, can we talk about my bow thing?
Yes.
Okay, this is a breakthrough for me I had this weekend.
Yeah, go ahead. So over the weekend, you know, one of the things Amanda doesn't like about like the money stuff is that it seems like it's very controlled and quantitative and scientific and whatever. And so this weekend there was a situation about bows, about making a bow, a 4th of July bow that was going to be sold, and you had a price point that you have been using, and then you went through a process to like spot check that price point. So how did that go?
Okay, so we have a Christmas, 4th of July bow. It's beautiful, huge, uses a ton of ribbon. And I was like, man, we've been selling that for $54.99 for about 3 years. And when I put that price on that custom bow, it's huge. It's this huge, beautiful bow. You put on a wreath, perfect for a wreath. I was like, $54.99, that sounds about right. Like, I know how much those rolls of ribbon cost. Not one time did I think I should get a calculator. Should I, write it out? Not one time. And I was like, you know what? Maybe it's time we start checking the math on that. Because most things, when it's just a product, it's easy to just be like, okay, we know that price for that. So so I had Mac and Emma and Buffy, my team, like do the numbers for me. I'm like, okay, guys, y'all do the numbers and let's see if my gut was right. My like shoot from the hip gut was right. Sure enough, the prices, we have not raised the prices on that ribbon in the last 3 years because I bought too much of it. So it's the prices, by now that the cost would be a lot more. So if you're buying right now, if you're buying 4th of July ribbon at Hello Holidays, you're getting a heck of a deal. And we cut it, anyway, ended up being total cost was $40 for the product for the ribbon. Now, to make that bow is hard. And so it's not hard, but our bows, we have people doing them that are the best at making bows. And so figuring out what's that time worth, and it ended up, that would have been about $15 to do the bow, to put the wire on it, to ship it, to have it in a box where it gets big enough to flow. So $54.99 was not far off from what I think a good price for that bow would be.
And I think we
moved it to $59.99.
Great.
And we sold a zillion. We sold almost all of them we put on the market.
That's awesome.
I know.
Here's the thing about that, right? We often discredit our own instincts. And I totally believe in working from like a swag or like a gut feel, because what you don't know is you've been doing it long enough and you've been so immersed in it that you do have this general sense and this sort of gut, and it's going to be right most of the time, and it's important to trust that it's going to be right most of the time. And also having the numbers to back it up just helps you, it should help reassure you that you're already right. It shouldn't be like, well, I should have done the math first. Who says you should do the math first? That's a way to do it. You could do the math, see where the math comes out, and be like, yeah, that sounds about right. Or you can say, I think it should be about this, and then double check it with the math. There's neither way is wrong, but I think in this sort of stereotypical male quantitative focused approach, the like accounting first kind of approach, those of us who come from a more, and I don't mean this like male female gendered way, I mean like feminine approach of like a instinctual approach to things that's been somewhat discredited, and it really shouldn't be, because it's just as likely to get to the same answer. You just have to develop those skill sets. So your gut is really highly developed. Your like instinct on things, your eye for what looks good, super highly developed, because that is what you have. It's like any other muscle group. That's what you've exercised all these years.
True.
Your calculator skills are not as fast or as good because you haven't exercised those skills. So you got to give yourself a little bit of leeway. It's not that you're not good at it, it's that you haven't practiced.
It haven't practiced, and it didn't look fun. It didn't look feel good, and I think that's what when you talk about Legos. Well, now we're playing a game.
That's right.
And so hey, for all the men listening, if you are married to a woman that is a 7 on the Enneagram and you come at her with a spending plan, she gonna be a part of that. Like, that's one. We've learned that. 2 is making it a game, like saying, if I get this, I can get this. And that's one thing that I love being business partners with you, because you're able to do that for me. And then also you don't shame me for not having those instincts. Men, I do feel like, respect people who know the numbers, like they like that. Or even business people, since I'm not from the business world and I'm moving in it. Business people are not taking people seriously who don't know the numbers. And that's why I have an insecurity of like, let me just not talk about it.
It's just learning a new language, right? It's not different than any other new language. You just have to take the time. And, you know, when we get to be middle-aged adults, we're not used to being beginners. Like in Buddhism, it's a thing to cultivate the beginner's mind, to be willing to be a beginner. Like when I learned to fly, so much of that exercise for me was starting totally from scratch, starting from complete novice beginner. I knew nothing. I'd been an expert in my field for years and years, and I felt, at a pretty young age, and I felt like it was so important to start truly as a like brand new beginner. And it's something that I'm so proud of both my kids for doing, because they both picked up new varsity level sports in high school, which in Arkansas is not done. Like if you haven't been playing since you were 4 or 5, you're not going to get a shot to play. And they both were willing to be the worst one on the team and be brand new. And they both got pretty good pretty fast, but you know, one of them in lacrosse and one of them in regular old American football. And like, that is actually a really kind of scary place of vulnerability to say like, everybody else is going to be better at this than me. But to not get discouraged and to like, you know, mess it up a bunch of times. And like, for me, that was a thing for sure about getting more confident about sort of the ever shifting sands of money in our little businesses is, you know, understanding that I could have a down week or make a mistake or forget to pay something or have to pay something late or whatever, and it wouldn't be the end of the world. It wouldn't be complete catastrophe if I made a mistake. Like, I have just enough of the, you know, perfectionist instinct that, like, my fear always had been like, well, if I do this wrong or don't get money moved fast enough or whatever, it'll be like disaster. It's like, actually, you just move it the next day.
Yeah.
It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah. We do get scared easily. And then in our focus, it almost is like, it's hard to make clear decisions when you get in that fear mentality. And money just sparks fear. I see it, I think, just seeing the money spark fear in so many people, just the way they talk about it, just by like, I never thought, yeah, I could talk about that forever. We will talk about money and how that works and how to make it a game. This is exciting.
Yeah.
This is exciting.
Well, and as we really gear up into Hello Holidays season, we can kind of talk about the numbers and get used to talking about the numbers and like, you know, what did we sell? What's the sales report look like this week? And how's that going?
Where's that pillow?
You'll get more used to it the more you
Sweating.
do it. Yeah.
Go back outside.
All right. We've hit Amanda's upper limit. on
Yeah,
the
we
money
have.
thing. We'll
Okay,
come back to that later.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Soul Blazers podcast. Kara and Amanda, your soul blazing big sisters, are just laying the foundation for all of the amazing things to come. If you want to stay up to date on new episodes, be notified of any discounts, or get a glimpse of what we are working on behind the scenes, go to soulblazers.com and subscribe to our newsletter. Until next time, Soul Blazers.